So, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. So, today we are back with another meeting. Today's meeting will be about a short story. Okay, so to start off, let's give the floor to Diana to give a bit of an insight about the story.
All right, thank you. I will talk about the um poet, which is Abdul Wahab Abdul Rauf. As I know that he is a Malaysian author who wrote children's literature and reading materials in Bahasa Melayu, and he is the author of Anak Tunggal, which is the book that we will translate, the book that we have translated. And the book is intended as a Malay language reader for young children and focuses on animal characters and moral values.
All right, thank you, Diana. Shazwina, do you have anything to add?
Okay, so I will tell about the introduction of this short story. So this short story is Anak Itik Tunggal is a heartwarming children's story that focuses on the life of Sidena, a mother hen preparing for a new family of chicks. Through her interactions with a friendly but lonely duck, the story explores the importance of friendship, compassion, and family bonds. The use of animal characters and simply storytelling makes the story engaging while conveying meaningful lessons to young readers.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Shazvina. So that is a bit of the insight of the short story that we have choose. Next, we move on to the overview of the whole story. Let's start with Diana.
All right, I'm sorry. The overview of the selected short story that we have chosen is taken from the Malay children's story that featuring two animals characters, which is Sidena and Si Itik. Sidena is a mother hen and Si Itik is a dog. The story actually focuses on friendship, kindness, and cooperation and caring for the others. And in this story, Itik become a friends with Sidena chicks and play with them and helps them to find food. As time passes, the chicks grows older while maintaining their friendships with Itik.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. Now we move on to Shazvina.
Okay. So the selected excerpt from Anak Itik Tunggal introduces the main characters and sets up the story's central situation. It begins with Sidena, a mother hen whose previous chicks have grown up and become independent. She starts a new cycle of laying eggs and patiently incubates them in her nest. During this period, a lonely duck frequently visits her and expresses a desire to play with her future chicks because it has no friends of its own. After weeks of waiting, Sidena's eggs hatch, and she is delighted to welcome 12 healthy chicks of different colors. Meanwhile, the duck remains unaware that it also has a child, creating anticipation for what will happen next in the story. The excerpt highlights several important themes, which are patience and responsibility, that are shown through Sidena's careful incubation of her eggs. Secondly, friendship and companionship, which are reflected in the duck's wish to have friends. Next is family and parental care, which are demonstrated by Sidena's excitement and love for her newly hatched chicks. Lastly, the theme of suspense and curiosity, which as the story hints at the duck's unknown connection to a child that has not yet been revealed. Overall, this excerpt serves as the exposition of the story, introducing the characters, setting, and the conflict that will likely develop around the duckling, and its relationship with Sidenat's family. That's all from me.
All right. Thank you very much, Shazvina. So, thank you to Diana and Shazvina for giving us a bit of the overview. All right. Thank you very much, Miss Shazvina and Miss Diana, for a bit of the overview. Now let's move on to as to why this translation is made and the skills that was used to translate the text from Malay to English. Let's start with Miss Diana.
As can you scroll down a little bit? All right. As what I have translated, the first thing that I use the strategy is using a cultural adaptation. I retain the original character name Sidena and Siite while adding their animal identities, which is mother hen is known as Sidena and dog is known as Siite, to help the English readers to understand the characters immediately. And this strategy preserves the cultural identity of the original text while improving comprehension for the target audience. Next, as for the literal translation, the original text boleh aku bermain dengan anak-anak kamu yang comel-comel ini. I translate it into may I play with your cute little cheeks. The reason why I use a literal translation because the meaning and the structure of the original sentence were largely maintained, which is a literal translation was suitable because the message is simple, clear, and easily understood in English without causing any awkwardness. And last but not least, the strategies that I use is transposition, which is the original text tidak jadilah seitik hendak terjun ke dalam kolam. I translate it to so she decided not to jump into the pond. The reason why I choose a transposition translation is because the sentence structure was changed to fit English grammatical convention. Rather than translating the phrase word to word, I express the intended meaning through a more natural English construction. That's all for me.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Diana. Now let's move on to Miss Shazvina.
Okay, now okay, so based on the translated excerpt, the key translation strategy appears to be literal or direct translation, where the translator closely follows the structure, content, and sequence of the original Malay text. Most sentences are translated word for word with minimal adaptation to English stylistic conventions. For example, the sentence tiap-tiap hari si dia nak bertelur, bertambahlah telurnya hari demi hari is translated as everyday si dia nak lay eggs, the number of eggs increase day by day, preserving both the meaning and sentence order. Similarly, dialogues between Sidena and the duck are rendered mostly directly from the source text. However, there are also instances of communicative translation, where slight modifications are made to improve clarity for English readers. For example, semua anaknya telah besar-besar belaka, mereka sudah pandai mencari makanan sendiri, becomes all her children were grown up, they were already good at finding their own food, which sounds more natural in English while maintaining the original meaning. Overall, the translation is predominantly literal translation as it prioritizes fidelity to the source text wording, sentence structure, and cultural elements, such as retaining the names Sidana and Siite, which with only minor adjustments for readability and grammatical correctness in English. That's all from me.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Azwina, and thank you to Miss Diana too for your explanation regarding the translation. Now we move on to the review and the feedback that will be analyzed by Miss Melissa. So, do you have anything to say?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Nazimi. So I do have several things I want to talk about as a reviewer. Based on my review of this excerpt, the translation successfully conveys the meaning of the source text and maintains a natural, child-friendly narrative style in English. The overall tone is consistent with the original story, and the characterization of mother hen and dove is preserved effectively. In terms of the meaning, there are no significant omissions or mistranslations. However, there are a few areas where wording choices could be refined to more closely reflect the source text. For example, Nazmi, can you scroll it? Nazmi? Okay, there. For example, the phrase competed to eat the worms may slightly weaken the sense of berebut-rebut, which conveys a more eager scrambling or jostling among the chicks. Alternative wording, such as scrambled for the worms, could better capture the original image. From a stylistic perspective, the translation reads smoothly and is appropriate for young readers, children and kids. The use of simple sentence structures supports readability and maintains the storytelling tone. Nevertheless, consistency in word choice could be improved. The action translated as scoop up earlier in the passage later becomes dug up, and maintaining the same expression throughout would strengthen cohesion. Next, regarding cultural references, the translator has appropriately localized the text while retaining key elements of the original setting. Reference such as the coop, lemongrass, pond, and worms remain accessible to English readers without losing the story's cultural flavor. The treatment of the character names, Sidena and Siite, should be checked against the project style guide to ensure consistency across all excerpts. Um, in addition, in terms of cohesion and narrative flow, the passage progresses logically and the sequence of events is easy to follow. One grammatical issue should be corrected in the final paragraph, which is day by day, mother hen's cheeks grew bigger. This should be revised to day by day, comma, mother hen's cheeks grew bigger to maintain fluency and grammatical accuracy. So overall, I would recommend accepting the translation with minor revisions. The text is accurate and readable, but with only a few stylistic and grammatical adjustments needed to improve consistency and narrative flow. Okay, that's all from me.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Melissa. Now we move on to Miss Alia Uzma. Do you have anything to say regarding the translation?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Miss
Thank you, Mr. Nazimi, and also thank you to Ms. Melissa as a reviewer first. I agree with the points mentioned about the translation's accuracy, readability, and overall quality. The translation successfully conveys the meaning of the source text and is easy for readers to understand. In addition, I would like to focus on the translation's effectiveness as a children's story. Firstly, the translator has successfully maintained the storytelling style of the original text. The language is simple and engaging, which makes the story enjoyable for young readers. Secondly, the translation effectively conveys the friendship and emotional connection between mother hen and duck. Readers can clearly see the caring relationship between the characters, which helps preserve the moral value of the story. Another strength is that the translation is well adapted to its target audience. The vocabulary and sentence structures are appropriate for children, making the story easy to follow, just like what Miss Melissa said, to follow from beginning to end. One area that could be improved maybe is the use of descriptive language. Some of scenes could be made more vivid through slightly more expressive word choices to make the story even more engaging. Overall, I agree with reviewer first that this translation is successful and only requires minor improvements. It is clear, natural, and suitable for young readers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Alia Usma. So that's a bit of the reviews about the translation that was made. Now we move on to the literary analysis. So we give the floor to the first literary analyst, Rajat Imran. Do you have anything to say?
Hello, thank you, Mr. Nazimi, to pass the floor to me. Now, sorry, I am analyzing the literary elements on the poem itself. Now, some of the literary elements that the original text and the translated text maintain is the characterization. So, for example, Sidana, mother hen, quite represents the maternal archetype. You know, the protective, cautious, yet, deeply empathetic, like a mother should be. Now, Siite, which is the duck, is some sort of an isolated protagonist or companion. It is driven by a desire of community and play, because the duck serves as an emblem of loneliness. Now, the setting of the story itself is the coop versus the pond. Now, the setting transitions from, the safe, enclosed domestic sphere of the chicken coop. For example, to say, like your home, a home where you feel safe, where you feel everything. You feel like home. And from there, from the chicken coop, which is a home, to the wider and potentially dangerous natural world, which is, the garden and the pond. So the plot and conflict, the narrative of of this short story follows a classic fable. Is that the word that I was looking for? Fable. Yes, I think it's fable. Uh, Structure with, gentle character-driven conflict. Now, the climax, the moment the duck reaches the pond, is a psychological climax where the duck must choose between her natural impulse, which is to swim, and the safety of her companions. Now, that is all that I can get as a literary analyst for the short story, and I will be passing the stage to Mr. Nazimi for the next literary analysis. I'm so sorry.
Alright, thank you very much, Raja Imran. So, as he said, I'm the second literary analyst for this translation. So, from what I found from this short story, okay, let's start with the themes. Okay, the themes that was used here is the friendship beyond differences. So the core message centers on how the harmony can exist between a completely different species, a duck and a family of chickens. It highlights that the difference is inherent nature do not prevent the deep bonds between them. And also there's also empathy and compassion. Sidena allows si Itik to play with her chicks purely out of compassion because she noticed that the duck is lonely and has no friends. So that is like the definition of compassion that we could find in the story. So next we move on to there is also a bit of responsibility and mindfulness in relationship. So how so? So we could see here that the genuine friendship requires looking out for the other's safety. So si Itik demonstrate this by overcoming her own instinct to jump into the pond and remembering that the chicks cannot swim because they are not an Itik. They are chickens. So that is a bit of the themes and the messages that I could find from the short story. Next, we move on to the literary elements. Okay, first off, characterization. Okay, the character Sidana, which is a mother hen, is a very nurturing, protective, and empathetic. I can say a person, animal. So this could be seen with the caring and for her cheeks, but it opens up her circle to the lonely duck out of pity or of it. So she ensures that the duck promised to be gentle first. Only then would they can connect with the bond with her cheeks. On the other hand, Siite, which is the duck, is a lonely, enthusiastic, and however, he is considerate, a considerate not person, animal. Okay. um, this could be seen by how desperate Siite wants friends to play with, and also immense maturity can be seen by him prioritizing him or her it by it prioritizing the chick's safety over its own desire to swim. Next is the setting. The setting is the coop and the garden, which represents safety, domestic life, and comfort of the family, as Raja Imran has said, and also the pond's edge, which represent a literal and metaphorical boundary line. Okay, so this point edge also serve as the point of conflict where the difference between duck and chicken really put into picture and was showcased evidently. Next is the symbolism and imagery. Okay, so the pond is it symbolizes the inherent difference of the potential danger, the boundary that requires understanding to navigate safely because a chicken cannot swim. So therefore it is a dangerous place for chickens. Next is the worms, which symbolize the shared sustenance, peace offering, and bonding between a chicken and a city. Next, digging for worms is an act of care by CET that bridges the gap between these two species. Next is the mixed chicks, the black and yellow, which symbolize the natural diversity within a single community, foreshadowing the acceptance of the dark. Then we go to the conflict type. The conflict type that's used here is person versus nature. Is internally, but however, the primary conflict is not between the characters, but it is rather the internal awareness of the natural limitation. Seated must consciously suppress her aquatic nature to protect her terrestrial friends because they cannot swim. That's a bit of the conflict in this story. Next is the cultural meanings and the implicit values in the story. In Malaysian culture, this story heavily reflects the societal values of gotong royong, communal cooperation, and kekeluargaan, which is the spirit of the family. First up, the community inclusivity. The treating a lonely neighbor, which is CET, as part of the family reflects the traditional village value, which is if you live in kampung, no one is left isolated and everyone is a big community. Next is respecting the boundaries. Okay, knowing that the chicks cannot swim teaches children the value of respecting the physical and emotional limitation of other people in the society. Therefore, children who read the story would know to not judge and to not judge others by how they look or their skills level. Okay, next is the how this translation affects the interpretation. So the honorific that's used, which is C in the CIT, C dana, retaining the Malay honorific of C, which is used in the Malay translation. So it preserves the traditional and affectionate storytelling style of Malay fables. Translating it strictly to Dihan and Didak would make the narrative feel cold and clinical. Wouldn't the emotional value of C would not be there. And the title paradox. The title is Anak Itik Tunggang, the only single duckling. Yet the narrative focuses heavily on the duck interacting with broods of chickens. This emphasizes the duck isolation and sets up a beautiful irony. She may be a single duckling, but she is never alone because of her adopted chicken family. That is a bit of the insight of the literary that I found. Now we move on to the next session, which is the reflection. Okay. I open the floor to anyone who wants to start with Dias.
Okay, I'll start first. So, translating the selected excerpt from Anak Itik Tunggal was a valuable experience that deepened my understanding of the relationship between language, culture, and literary expression. Throughout the translation process, I had to consider the cultural context of the story, particularly its portrayal of family relationships, animal characters, and values such as friendship, patience, and care, which are commonly emphasized in Malay children's literature. Preserving the narrative voice was equally important as the original text uses simple and gentle language to engage young readers. Therefore, I aim to maintain the story's warmth and simplicity while ensuring that the translation sounded natural in English. Literary elements such as dialogue, characterization, and repetition also influence my translation decisions as these features contribute to the story's child-friendly tone and rhythm. One of the main challenges I faced was translating culturally embedded meanings and expressions without losing their original significance. Certain words Naming conventions and cultural nuances, such as the use of C before character names, do not have direct equivalents in English. As a result, I had to decide whether to retain these elements to preserve the cultural identity or adapt them for greater readability. This experience taught me that translation involves more than transferring words between languages, as it also requires balancing linguistic accuracy, cultural representation, and the expectations of the target audience. That's all from me.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Shazvina. So then we move on to the next person. Would that be Miss Diana?
Alright, as for me, as for my reflection, I realized that translating the excerpt from Malay into English was a meaningful learning experience. And at first, I thought that the text would be easy because it is a children's story with a simple vocabulary. However, during the translation process, I realized that translation involved more than changing words from language to another language. And one challenges that I faced was translating expression and repetitive structure naturally. And then I had to choose English expressions such as eagerly scramble and happily to make the sentence more fluent while keeping the original meaning. And another challenge was maintaining the child-friendly tone of the story. The original text is warm, simple, and suitable for young readers. Therefore, I avoided using complicated vocabulary and focuses on clear and easy to understand the sentence. And this helped me to realize that the target audience is an important factor in translation. And by translating this short story, I realized that translator must balance accuracy and readability, which is a translation that is too literal may not sound natural, while a translation that is too free may change the original message. That's all for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Miss Diana. Now we move on to Miss Melissa.
Um, for my reflection as the reviewer, I achieved a valuable experience that highlighted the importance of balancing accuracy and readability in literary translation. Through the review process, I became more aware of how cultural context, narrative voice, and literary elements influence the way a translated story is understood by readers. One key aspect I evaluated was whether the translation maintained the simple and engaging narrative voice of the original text. Since the story is intended for young readers, it was important that the language remain clear, natural, and accessible while preserving the warmth and playfulness of the characters. Um, Other than that, cultural context was also an important consideration. Certain Malay terms and character names such as Sidena and Siite carry cultural significance that may not have direct English equivalents. Assessing how these elements were translated required balancing cultural authenticity with reader comprehension. In addition, I reviewed how literary features such as repetition and descriptive imagery were preserved. Retaining these elements helps maintain the storytelling style and engagement of the original text, particularly for younger audiences. Overall, this review experience deepened my understanding of literary translation and demonstrated that an effective translation should communicate not only meaning, but also the tone, culture, and style of the original work. That's all from me.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Melissa. And now we move on to Miss Alia Uzma. Alright, due to some connection issue, let's move on for now. Raja Imran, do you have anything to say regarding your what you have learned from our translation today?
So, from our translation, um, in the as part of the literary elements, sorry, analyst, some of the challenge that I can see is that the literal translation from the duck is like, they maintain the character's name, such as the duck and CET. However, notice how the translation naturally evolves for the second half of the use. Like capitalize words such as mother hen and duck. Now, the reflection that I got is that the choice of the translator choose is that they show an understanding of target language conventions in Western fables like Aesop's capitalization. I'm so sorry. Mother hen, duck, or fox is the standard tool used to give animals human status and authority. So by shifting to the style, the translators made the story feel instantly familiar and classic to an English-speaking reader. And some of it is the redundancy and pacing across languages. In Okay, for example, in Malay storytelling, especially for children, it frequently uses proper nouns. It repeats of the usage of proper nouns to maintain clarity. For example, repeating sidera and siite multiple times in consecutive sentences. So I can see the challenges. The translators um, translating in translating it in English, repeating names too often can make the text, feel choppy, robotic, and overly simplistic. Now, the reflection that I get is that as translator, you guys can probably have to balance the fidelity to original text with the flow of the target language by using pronouns like she, her, they, or him, his, or alternating between mother hen and the chicks allows, the English version of to maintain the gentle, fluid rhythm necessary for a bedtime story or children's book. So that is all that I can get. The reflection for this translation, and yeah, I will pass the floor to Alia Usman, back to Alia Usman, since she's already in the call.
All right. Thank you. Okay. For myself individual reflection, through this translation review task, I gain a better understanding of the importance of evaluating a translation beyond its literal meaning. I learned that a good translation is not only about accuracy, but also about ensuring the text is natural, relatable, and appropriate for its target audience. While reviewing the translated text, I became more aware of how translators make decisions regarding word choice, style, and sentence structure. I realized that even when a translation is accurate, small adjustments can improve the overall reading experience and make the story more engaging for readers. This does also help me develop my critical thinking skills instead of simply reading text. And I had to analyze whether the translator successfully conveyed the tone, emotions, and purpose of the original story. This allowed me to appreciate the challenges involved in the translation process. Overall, this experience has increased my appreciation for the role of translators and has helped me become a more careful and analytical reader. I believe the skills I gain from this task will be useful in future translation and language related projects. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Aluzma. Then from me myself, from this translation, some of the things that I gain is to know the power of narrative voice and the simplicity. So the deception of the innocence that is initially Anak Itik Tunggal in this story looks like a simple children's fable, but looking at it through an analytical lens reveal how carefully and narrative voice balance the innocence and the deep moral philosophy of the story. Next is the translation challenge. One of the biggest challenge is maintaining the gentle, nurturing voice without making it sound overly clinical and childish in English. So we had to choose the words that preserve the warmth of a traditional Malay treater, which is a folk tale. Next is navigating the cultural embedded meanings. So as I've said earlier, the usage of C. So I won't go into more detail about that because I've explained it earlier. And the vivid onomatopoeia and actions, which is words like menyudu, like how the sea ite scoops up soils and water with its bill, do not have a poetic single word equivalent in English. So we had to unpack this into culture embedded nature-centric verbs into descriptive phrase and without distracting the flow. Next is the influence of cultural context on interpretation. Decoding the underlying values of this story heavily mirrors the Malay values of kindness and neighborliness. Sidernak's willingness to let the lonely duck play with her chicks out of pure empathy reflects the communal and collective society that we in Malaysia have. And the pond metaphor is taught me how the physical space can carry metaphorical weight. And the edge of the pond represent the cultural and biological boundary line that we have. In conclusion, ultimately, this thus have proved that a literary analyst cannot function in a vacuum separate from the translator. Every grammatical choice affects the theme, and every cultural nuance shapes the characterization. So it has taught me to look beneath the surface of simple prose and appreciate the delicate, beautiful complexity of the cross-cultural communication. All right, that's all from me. Thank you very much. So with that, we have reached the end of our meeting today. Thank you very much everyone for attending. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.